Hey friends, it's Suzanne Mosley. You can find me here on YouTube at Suzanne Shares Usborne Books. Also online on my blog, Suzanne Shares, and my Facebook page for that as well, Suzanne Shares on Facebook. So I wanted to make a quick video. I did this with my Classical Conversations community during our assembly time a couple of weeks ago. We're doing different topics this year with family presentation. We have some new families, but not enough new families to fill those family presentation slots. So one thing we're doing is just having some families that have been around for a while just speak on different topics. Why to do Memory Master, why you should go to Practicum. And one thing that I would do is to kind of share my elevator speech with our community regarding the classical model of education. So I'm asked that a lot when people find out we do classical conversations. They're like, what's that? And I tell them, well, it's based on the classical model of education. Are you familiar with that? And most people aren't. So this is my elevator speech of what I share with them. If you don't know, an elevator speech is just kind of a minute or two summary about a topic that you would give literally when you have a minute or two with somebody on an elevator. It's kind of the concept. So what I shared with them for my elevator speech about what the classical model is. So it is and again, this is not, people could write a dissertation on the classical model of education, but it is classical. It's based on classic things because it's been around for a long, long time. This is how children back in the olden days, back in ancient civilizations, kind of the model, the way that they were educated. So that's kind of where the classical comes from. But really, I don't really even focus on that. I focus on child development because that, as a mom, that's what's really been exciting for me as a parent with my children. So I love the classical model of education because it follows child development. So the classical model of education has three, we call it three roads. The dialectics, the grammar stage, the dialectic stage, and the rhetoric stage. And so what I typically share about the grammar stage, I just usually ask them questions. Like when your kids are young, like they can memorize anything. They watch a commercial and then they can walk around the house and they can sing it perfectly. And they don't just sing it once, they sing it 5,000 times. Or they listen to the little, lullaby CD at night and they can sing every word after only listening to it one time. So, and I'm like, don't your kids do that? And they're like, yeah, totally. So I'm like, yeah, that's the grammar stage that a child is in, which is what we follow with the classical model. So in the grammar stage, when they can memorize a lot, they do. We focus on a lot of memory work, a lot of memory work because their brains are sponges. It's fun for them. The repetition of just learning random facts that they don't even understand. It's really, really a highlight for them. They really, really love it. So while they can, while it's so easy for them, we really focus on that. So that's the grammar stage. The second stage is called the dialectic stage. And I typically ask them, do you have teenagers or were you ever a teenager? Yes, they usually say yes. Okay. So how teenagers like to argue a lot. And they're like, yeah, okay. So in the dialectic stage, that's very developmental for teenagers, early teenagers, to just like to argue. So as concerning the classical model, during the dialectic stage, we focus on teaching teaching teenagers how to think through their arguments and argue in a logical way. Yes, teenagers can learn to think and argue logically. So they developmentally love to argue. So kind of the way that is corralled with those teenagers in the classical model is teaching them how to do that in a logical way. So again, we're going with the grain of how children are. So grammar stage, the very first one, while they can memorize like crazy, we let them memorize. They don't understand it, and that's okay. So when they get to the dialectic stage and they like to argue, they're pulling from a lot of the facts that they've memorized when they were in the grammar stage. And so it's also kind of a time where they're cementing their beliefs, and they're just kind of logically learning how to organize all those facts that they memorized in the grammar stage. So that's a dialectic stage. It's just learning how to argue well. And then the third stage is a rhetoric stage. And I usually ask them, I don't know if you remember, like when you're in high school, is about expressing yourself. We like to express ourselves. I remember when I was my senior year, everybody had senior t-shirts, but I made sure that mine was the only one that was a certain color with a certain style, because I wanted to be different from everybody else. And so the rhetoric stage, that is in child development, like older high school, where kids, I call them kids, but where teenagers really want to express themselves. They want to be individuals. They want to be different. So in the rhetoric stage, there's a lot of emphasis. The rhetoric stage of the classical model, there's a lot of emphasis on expression, presenting, taking what you've learned and presenting it creatively, maybe, doing like a monologue or creating an art, a piece of art that communicates what you've learned about a Shakespeare play. So that the emphasis is on expressing themselves. So kind of taking that next step further than learning how to argue well, because at that point in the rhetoric stage, they're all about, again, themselves and presenting and expressing and being their own individual. So that's kind of the elevator speech that I will give when I'm explaining the classical model. We have there's three roads, 3 stages: grammar, rhetoric, and dialectic, and they do follow child development. And that is, and I kind of will, go through those questions that I just shared, and just really emphasize, that's how children develop. I remember this from my developmental psych class in college. That's how they develop, and I like that it is, I'm working with the child. I'm not working against where they are developmentally and naturally. And another way to think about it, that this might be another good way for you to picture elevator speech for the classical model, is to think about a computer. So in the grammar stage of the classical model, it's kind of like with a computer, you're doing a lot of entry. You're doing a lot of data entry. They're memorizing lots and lots of facts. So then the computer is a big processor. And so it's taking all that information that was entered during the grammar stage, and it's begun to be processed and organized. And that's the dialectic stage. And then the rhetoric stage is the output. They've taken the information, they've organized it, processed it, and now they're presenting it. That printer is being printed, and stories are being printed. The presentation of the material and expressing themselves, that's what's happening in the rhetoric stage. So I hope that's helpful. I encourage you to come up with your own elevator speech about the classical model, because hopefully you're enjoying your time in classical conversations, and people probably ask you that question. And, who knows, maybe their children would benefit from being a part of your CC group too. And so if you feel equipped to talk about it, hopefully that will empower you to share with others. So thanks so much. I hope that was helpful, and I appreciate you stopping by. Thanks, friends.